I was 38 years old when I learned that the man I was supposed to marry had never really belonged to me at all. On Monday night, Ethan was supposed to come home. Instead, I got a text. Flight delayed. Back tomorrow afternoon. Miss you. Followed by 6 red heart emojis, as if affection could be typed out on a screen and still mean something. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Flights get delayed. Men on bachelor trips stay out too late. Life happens. I remember reading the message in my kitchen, barefoot on the cold tile, smiling to myself like a woman who still believed she was loved. By Tuesday evening, that version of me was gone. At a little after 8, my phone buzzed with a message from Maya Chen, Ethan's closest friend from college. She had gone on the Vegas trip too. Maya had always been kind to me, but distant in that careful, polite way people are when they know more than they say. Her message was short. Natalie, we need to talk. This is important. Check your email. The second I read it, something turned inside my chest. Not fear, exactly. Something heavier. Something female intuition had been whispering for months, while I kept silencing it with love, patience, and the desperate optimism women are taught to call loyalty. I opened my laptop with shaking hands. There it was. An email from Maya with the subject line, "I'm sorry, but you need to see this before Saturday." Saturday. Our wedding day. The message itself was only a few lines. She said she had debated sending it. She said I deserved the truth. She said she was sorry. Then there was the video. I clicked it, and my whole life split open. On that screen was Ethan in a hotel suite in Las Vegas, completely naked, with 2 women I had never seen before. He wasn't confused. He wasn't drunk out of his mind. He wasn't stumbling through a mistake he would regret in the morning. He was laughing, enjoying it, performing betrayal like it was entertainment. And then I heard the part that truly killed something inside me. One of the women asked if he felt bad cheating this close to his wedding. Ethan laughed and said, "Please, once I marry Natalie, real fun is over." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the screen, while my heart kept beating inside a body that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. That was the moment I realized I was not about to become a wife. I was about to become a woman who had to survive the ruin of everything she thought was real. My name is Natalie Callahan. I was 38 years old, a senior IT systems architect in Seattle, and until that Tuesday night, I believed I had finally built the life I had spent most of my adult years working toward. Stability, partnership, a future that felt certain. Ethan Sutherland came into my life 3 years earlier at a charity technology fundraiser hosted downtown. I had been there reluctantly, representing my company, wearing a navy dress that felt too formal for a networking event full of investors and executives. Ethan had been standing near the bar, arguing about cybersecurity with someone who clearly had no idea what they were talking about. That was the first thing I noticed about him. Confidence. Not the loud, obnoxious kind, the smooth, effortless kind that made people naturally step back and listen. When the conversation ended, he walked over and said, "You look like you wanted to jump in and correct both of us." I laughed. I was considering it. That night we talked for almost 2 hours. About technology, about travel, about the strange pressure of turning 30 and realizing life didn't magically organize itself the way people promised when you were younger. He was charming, attentive, and warm in a way that felt disarming. At the time, I didn't know he was the son of George Sutherland, a retired bank president whose name carried quiet weight in Seattle's old money circles. Ethan never mentioned it. I found out later. At first, I actually liked that about him. He seemed normal, grounded. Our relationship grew slowly but naturally. Dinner dates turned into weekends together. Weekends turned into long stretches where he practically lived at my place. Ethan had his own apartment downtown, but my house became our center of gravity. He would leave his running shoes by the door, his jacket over the kitchen chair, his toothbrush next to mine. The kind of small domestic details that slowly build the illusion of permanence. Looking back now, there were warning signs. Small ones, subtle ones. But love has a remarkable ability to smooth over things that should probably stop you in your tracks. Ethan was always very careful about his phone. He would flip it face down on the table, take calls in the other room sometimes. At the time, I told myself it was normal. Everyone had privacy. Another thing I ignored was the way his friends behaved around me, especially Jessica Price. Jessica had known Ethan since college, and from the moment we met, she treated me with a polite distance that felt almost rehearsed. Not openly rude, but dismissive. Like she was evaluating whether I belonged in Ethan's world. Once, after a dinner party, I overheard her telling someone in the hallway, "Ethan usually dates women who are more his speed." I pretended not to hear. Because at the time, Ethan seemed completely devoted to me. He brought me coffee in the mornings. He held my hand in public. He told me he loved me in a way that felt sincere enough to quiet every doubt. 2 years into our relationship, he proposed. It happened on a quiet cliffside overlook during a weekend trip to Vancouver Island. He got down on one knee, pulled out a ring, and said the words every woman secretly hopes will come one day. "Natalie, will you marry me?" I remember laughing through tears. Yes. That night we called our families. His mother, Patricia Sutherland, cried with joy. She immediately started talking about venues, guest lists, flowers, and seating charts, like she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. His father congratulated me warmly. For a while, everything felt like a dream finally unfolding. But sometimes the most dangerous dreams are the ones that look perfect from the outside. Because perfection is often just a lie, waiting for the right moment to collapse. And mine collapsed 5 days before the wedding, when a 12-minute video from Las Vegas showed me the man I loved laughing in a hotel room with 2 women who were not me. That was the moment when 3 years of memories suddenly began rearranging themselves into something darker, something I should have seen coming, but didn't. When I look back now, the signs were everywhere. Not dramatic signs. Nothing obvious enough to make a woman cancel a wedding. Just the quiet, nagging inconsistencies that you notice and then choose to ignore. Because love has a way of turning doubt into something you apologize for feeling. About 6 months before the wedding, Ethan started traveling more for work. At least, that's what he said. He worked in corporate consulting, the kind of job where vague explanations like client meetings and strategy sessions were perfectly believable. Some weeks he would be gone 2 or 3 nights. "Chicago this week," he'd say. "San Diego next week." Sometimes he would send pictures from hotel rooms or airports, little proof-of-life updates that reassured me he was where he said he was. I never questioned them. Why would I? We were engaged. We were planning a wedding. Suspicion felt like betrayal in itself. Still, there were moments, little cracks in the story. One evening, about 4 months before the wedding, we were at dinner with several of his friends. Jessica was there, along with Amanda Foster and Christine Yang, women who had known Ethan long before I came into his life. The conversation drifted to bachelor and bachelorette parties. Jessica grinned and said, "Vegas is going to be dangerous for Ethan." Everyone laughed. Ethan smiled too, but something about the look on his face made my stomach tighten. "Relax," he said casually, squeezing my hand. "I'm a boring, domesticated man now." The table laughed again, but Jessica didn't. She just gave him a long look and said quietly, "Sure you are." At the time, I brushed it off as their usual sarcastic friendship dynamic. Now I realize it was something else, something closer to familiarity with behavior I didn't know about. Another moment came 2 months later. Ethan and I were watching a movie when his phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up just long enough for me to see a message preview before he flipped it over. "Jessica, you're unbelievable. Did Natalie ever find out about—" The message cut off. He grabbed the phone quickly. "Work stuff," he said, standing up. "I need to take this." He stepped outside onto the patio. The call lasted 15 minutes. When he came back in, he kissed the top of my head like nothing had happened. I didn't ask about it. Part of me didn't want the answer. Wedding planning filled the next several weeks with the kind of chaos that leaves little room for reflection. His mother, Patricia, had turned the ceremony into something bordering on a social event of the season. The venue was booked months in advance, Invitations were sent to hundreds of guests. Caterers, florists, live band, photographer. Every detail polished until the whole thing looked like something from a magazine spread. People kept telling me how lucky I was. You're marrying into such a wonderful family. You and Ethan are perfect together. 3 weeks from now, you'll be Mrs. Sutherland. Every time someone said that, I felt a strange flicker of unease I couldn't quite explain. Not fear, not doubt, just a quiet question. Sometimes late at night, lying in bed next to Ethan while he slept, I would study his face in the dark. He looked peaceful, safe, familiar. And yet there were moments when I wondered how well we ever truly know another person. Whether the version of someone we fall in love with is always real, or just the part they choose to show us. The bachelor trip to Las Vegas was supposed to happen 1 week before the wedding. A last celebration with his friends. 3 days. Nothing wild, Ethan promised. Just poker, shows, and drinks with the guys. He kissed my forehead the morning he left. I'll miss you. I believed him. Because trusting the man you're about to marry is supposed to be the easiest thing in the world. But the truth was already waiting in my inbox. And when Maya Chen finally decided to send that video, every tiny moment I had ignored suddenly started making sense. The video was 12 minutes long. I know that because the timestamp sat in the corner of the screen, like a quiet countdown to the destruction of my life. At first, I almost closed it. Not because I didn't want the truth, but because a part of me already knew what I was about to see. And once you see something like that, there's no returning to the version of the world where everything still makes sense. Still, my hand moved before my mind could stop it. I pressed play. The camera angle was slightly crooked, as if it had been filmed from behind a half-open door. The lighting came from the soft lamps of what looked like an expensive hotel suite. I recognized the decor immediately. Vegas. Ethan stood in the center of the room, wearing nothing but a loose hotel robe. 2 women stood near him, both laughing, both clearly intoxicated with the reckless energy people get in cities designed to erase consequences. For the first few seconds, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I kept waiting for the moment where something would clarify. A misunderstanding, a prank, anything. Instead, Ethan dropped the robe, and the illusion of my relationship shattered along with it. The next several minutes felt like watching someone else's nightmare. The Ethan in that room wasn't the man who brought me coffee every morning. He wasn't the man who kissed my forehead before leaving for work. This version of him was loud, cocky, performative. He moved through the room with the relaxed confidence of someone who had done this before. The women teased him about getting married. One of them asked, half laughing, "Doesn't your fiancé have something to say about this?" Ethan laughed. That laugh is the part I still remember most clearly. It wasn't nervous. It wasn't ashamed. It was amused. "Please," he said, shaking his head. "Once I marry Natalie, real fun is over." The women laughed with him. One of them asked if he felt guilty. Ethan leaned back against the bed and shrugged. What she doesn't know won't hurt her. Then he added something that made my chest physically tighten. My fiancé would die if she could see this. He said it like a joke, like the idea of humiliating me was entertaining. The camera stayed steady the entire time. Maya hadn't stopped recording. I don't know how long I sat there after the video ended. The laptop screen dimmed. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. 12 minutes. 3 years of love erased in 12 minutes. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them flat against the desk to stop them. For a while, I simply stared at the wall, trying to reconcile the 2 versions of Ethan in my mind. The man I loved, and the man in that hotel room. Eventually, something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was something colder, clearer. The same quiet focus that had helped me build my career solving complex system failures. Because that was what this was. A catastrophic failure. And once you understand the problem, you start figuring out how to shut it down. I picked up my phone. The first call I made was to the wedding venue. "Hello," I said calmly when the coordinator answered. "This is Natalie Callahan. I need to cancel the wedding scheduled for this Saturday." She sounded confused. "But Miss Callahan, the event is only 5 days away. There are deposits, contracts. I understand, I said evenly. Please cancel everything. The next call was to the caterer, then the photographer, the band, the florist. One by one, I dismantled the wedding that had taken months to plan. Every cancellation felt like pulling another thread from the lie I had been living inside. Some vendors asked if I was sure. Others tried to warn me about the financial penalties. I repeated the same sentence every time. The wedding is canceled. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. I opened Maya's email again, attached the video, then forwarded it to two people who deserved to know the truth before anyone else. Patricia and George Sutherland, Ethan's parents. My message was short. Patricia, George, this is why there will be no wedding on Saturday. The video was filmed 3 days ago in Las Vegas. Natalie, I hit send. And in that moment, my future as Ethan Sutherland's wife officially ended. What I didn't realize yet was that the real confrontation hadn't even begun. After I sent the email to Ethan's parents, the house became unbearably quiet. It was a strange kind of silence. Not peaceful, not calm. The kind of silence that follows an explosion. When everything around you is still standing, but you know the damage has already been done. For almost an hour, I sat in my office staring at nothing. My mind kept replaying the video, not the physical parts. Those were almost easier to process. What haunted me was the sound of his voice, the laughter, the way he spoke about me like I was an inconvenience, waiting for him at the end of his fun. Eventually, my phone began to ring. The first call came about 20 minutes after I sent the email. George Sutherland, Ethan's father. His name glowed across my screen while the phone vibrated against the desk. I watched it ring until it stopped. Then it rang again. This time, Patricia. Then George again. Then Patricia again. 5 missed calls in less than 10 minutes. I ignored all of them. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I didn't trust myself to speak yet. What could I possibly say? Hello. The son you raised just humiliated me in a hotel room in Las Vegas 3 days before our wedding. There was no version of that conversation that wouldn't destroy them. Around 11 that night, another call came in. This time it was my younger brother, Daniel Callahan. Daniel had always been blunt in the way only siblings can be. He worked as a contractor and had the personality of someone who had never learned to soften his opinions. When I answered, the first thing he said was, "Natalie, what the hell happened?" Apparently, Patricia had already started calling people. Word was spreading. "I saw the email," Daniel continued carefully. "Are you okay?" For a moment, I didn't answer. Then the words started coming out. I told him everything. The video. The things Ethan had said. The calls I had made canceling the wedding. Daniel didn't interrupt once, which was unusual for him. When I finally finished, there was a long pause. Then he exhaled slowly. "Jesus, Nat." Another pause. Honestly, I never trusted that guy. I rubbed my temples. "Why didn't you say anything? Would you have listened?" he replied quietly. That question hit harder than anything else, because the answer was obvious. No, I wouldn't have. I had been completely in love with Ethan. Anyone criticizing him would have sounded jealous, cynical, or overly protective. Daniel continued more gently. "So what happens now?" "I don't know." And that was the honest truth. For the first time in 3 years, the future I had built in my head simply didn't exist anymore. Daniel's voice softened. "Whatever you do, I've got your back. And Nat, yeah? You did the right thing canceling everything. Don't give him the chance to talk his way out of it." After the call ended, I walked into the living room. Dozens of wedding gifts had already arrived. Boxes stacked neatly along the wall. Crystal glassware, fine china, kitchen appliances, all the objects meant to start a happy married life. Now they looked like evidence from a crime scene. My phone buzzed again. A text this time. "Maya Chen, I saw that you forwarded the video to his parents." Good. He deserves everything that's coming to him. I stared at the message for a moment before replying, "Thank you for telling me." Her response came quickly. "Natalie, there's something else you should know. This isn't the first time Ethan has cheated." The words felt like another blow to the chest. I typed back slowly. "How long?" A few seconds passed before she answered. "I'm not sure, but I've suspected it for months. I just never had proof until this trip. I leaned back against the couch and closed my eyes. 3 years. 3 years with a man who had apparently been living a completely different life behind my back. Another message appeared. I'm sorry. I know this is destroying you, but you deserve someone who actually loves you. I set the phone down without responding, because at that moment, love felt like a concept from another universe. All I knew was this. Tomorrow, Ethan would come home from Las Vegas, expecting to see his fiancé waiting for him. Instead, he was about to walk into the ruins of the life he thought he still had. And I wasn't sure yet how that confrontation was going to end. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never be the same woman he left behind when he boarded that plane. Ethan's flight was scheduled to land at 3:05 p.m. I knew because I had been tracking it all morning. Not because I planned to pick him up. That version of the story was over. But I wanted to know exactly when the man who destroyed our relationship would step back into the city, expecting his life to still be intact. The plane landed at 3:11 p.m. By then, I had already started packing his things. Technically, Ethan still had his own apartment downtown, but for the last 6 months, he had been staying at my house almost every night. His life had slowly spread across my home. His suits filled half my closet. His shoes were lined up near the door. His expensive cologne sat next to my perfume in the bathroom. Removing those things felt strangely surgical, like extracting something toxic from a body. I folded his shirts carefully, placed them in boxes, shoes, jackets, laptop chargers. Even the ridiculous collection of designer sunglasses he kept losing and replacing. Every item I packed peeled away another layer of the life we had been building together. The framed photo from last Christmas was the hardest. We were standing in front of a decorated tree, both of us smiling. At the time, I believed that smile meant happiness. Now it looked like a performance. I wrapped the frame in newspaper and placed it in the box with the rest of his belongings. By the time I finished, 3 large boxes were stacked near the front door. I was sealing the third one with tape when the doorbell rang. 4:32 p.m. He must have taken a ride straight from the airport. Before I could reach the door, I heard the key turning in the lock. Ethan walked in, pulling his suitcase behind him. He looked exactly the way I remembered, relaxed. Sun-touched from the Vegas heat, his dark hair perfectly styled like he had just stepped out of a magazine advertisement. Nat, he said with a warm smile, God, I missed you. He dropped the suitcase and opened his arms, stepping toward me. Instinctively expecting the usual welcome home hug, I stepped back. Don't. The word hung between us like a sudden crack in the air. He froze. Confusion flickered across his face. What's wrong? He asked gently. Are you okay? His voice was calm. Concerned. The performance was flawless. How was Vegas? I asked quietly. He shrugged casually. It was great. The guys had a good time. Some poker, some shows. Nothing crazy. He smiled. That same charming smile that used to make my chest feel warm. I brought you something. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small gift bag. Just a little souvenir. I didn't take it. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I already got my souvenir. His eyebrows drew together slightly. What do you mean? I opened the video Maya had sent, turned the phone toward him, and pressed play. The change in his face happened almost instantly. The color drained from his skin. His eyes widened as recognition hit. For 10 seconds, he stood completely still. Then he lunged forward. Turn that off. I pulled the phone away before he could grab it. Why? I asked calmly. You seem to be enjoying yourself. Natalie, please. Explain. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the living room. It's not what it looks like. The oldest lie in human history. Really? I said softly. Because it looks exactly like my fiancé sleeping with 2 women 3 days before our wedding. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. We were drinking, he said finally. Everyone was drunk. Things got out of control. Stop. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. I watched the entire 12 minutes, Ethan. That stopped him. You weren't confused. You weren't drunk. You were laughing. He sat down heavily on the couch, his confident facade cracking for the first time. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered. Yet somehow it did. He looked up at me. "Who sent you that?" "Maya." His face twisted with anger. "That snake. Because she has a conscience." Tears suddenly filled his eyes. "Natalie, please. I love you." The words felt hollow now. "I want to marry you," he continued desperately. "This was just a stupid mistake." "A mistake you filmed?" "I didn't know anyone was recording." "So the only thing you regret," I said quietly, "is getting caught." He shook his head frantically. "No, that's not what I meant." I slid my phone back into my pocket. "The wedding is in 3 days, Ethan." Relief flashed across his face. "Yes, exactly. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. There is no wedding." The relief vanished. "What?" "I canceled everything yesterday. The venue, the caterer, the band, the flowers." I paused. "And I sent the video to your parents." The look of horror that crossed his face was almost surreal. "You didn't." "I did." He grabbed his phone from his pocket. Within seconds, the screen lit up with missed calls. Dozens of them. From George Sutherland. From Patricia Sutherland. From relatives. Family, friends. Ethan stared at the screen like the ground had just disappeared beneath him. Oh my God. He looked up at me, panic rising in his voice. "Natalie, how could you do this to me?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "How could I do this to you? You humiliated me." "You humiliated yourself." He stood suddenly, anger replacing panic. "You destroyed my reputation." "You destroyed our relationship." For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then I pointed toward the boxes by the door. "Your things are packed." His voice dropped. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore." He looked at me for a long moment, and I could almost see the calculations happening behind his eyes, searching for some way to manipulate the situation. "Natalie, please," he said quietly. "I know I messed up, but we can fix this." "No. I'll do anything." There is no we anymore. The silence that followed felt heavy and final. My phone suddenly rang. George Sutherland, again. I answered it. "Hello, George." His voice sounded strained. "Natalie, we need to talk. Can you come over?" Behind me, Ethan whispered urgently, "Don't you dare." I ignored him. "I'll be there in an hour." When I hung up, Ethan stepped toward me. "You can't go there. Watch me." I grabbed my keys. "Be gone when I get back," I said calmly. "Leave the key on the counter." "Natalie." But I was already walking out the door. And for the first time since the video appeared in my inbox, I finally felt something stronger than heartbreak. Resolve. The drive to the Sutherland house felt longer than it actually was. Traffic moved slowly through the quiet residential streets of Bellevue. And for the first time since everything had exploded, the adrenaline that had been carrying me forward began to fade. Without it, the weight of what had happened started settling into my chest. 3 years. 3 years of love. 3 years of plans. 3 years of believing I had finally found the man I would build a life with. And now I was driving to his parents' house to explain why their only son had destroyed everything 5 days before the wedding they had been planning for months. The Sutherland home stood at the end of a long, curved driveway, the kind of old money mansion that seemed designed to quietly announce success without needing to say a word. Tall, white columns, perfectly trimmed hedges, warm lights glowing behind tall windows. I had been here dozens of times before. Family dinners, holiday parties, Sunday afternoons with Patricia discussing wedding details over tea. It had started to feel like a second home. Now it felt like walking into the ruins of something that no longer existed. Before I even reached the front door, it opened. Patricia Sutherland stood there. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her usually immaculate hair was slightly disheveled, and her eyes were swollen from crying. "Natalie," she said softly. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she stepped forward and hugged me tightly. "I'm so sorry, dear." That almost broke me. Not Ethan's betrayal, not the video, but the quiet kindness of the woman who had been planning to welcome me as her daughter-in-law in 5 days. She led me inside. "George is in his study," she said quietly. The house was unusually silent. Normally, the place buzzed with activity, staff moving through the halls, music playing softly somewhere in the background. Tonight, it felt like a mausoleum. George Sutherland sat behind the large wooden desk in his office. He looked older than he had just a week ago. The strong, confident posture he usually carried had been replaced by a heavy stillness. "Sit down, Natalie," he said. I sat in the leather chair across from him, the same chair where 6 months earlier he had shaken my hand and welcomed me into his family after Ethan proposed. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then Patricia's voice broke the silence. "Is it real?" I knew what she meant. "The video?" I nodded slowly. "Yes." George leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. "Are you absolutely certain?" he asked. "There are programs now, things that can alter footage." Ethan admitted it. Patricia made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "How could he do this?" she whispered. 3 days before his wedding. I didn't have an answer for that. George stared at the desk for a long moment. Then he asked quietly, "What do you want from us?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm sorry?" "Compensation," he said bluntly. "For the wedding expenses, for the humiliation, for anything you've lost because of this." I shook my head immediately. "I don't want anything from you." "Then why send us the video?" "Because you deserve to know the truth before Saturday." The room went silent again. Finally, Patricia spoke. Maybe this can still be fixed." George looked at her sharply, but she continued. "Young people make mistakes," she said desperately. "With counseling, with time." I felt something inside my chest tighten. "Patricia," I said gently, "your son slept with 2 women at the same time while laughing about how boring his fiancé was." Her face crumpled. "That's not a mistake you fix with therapy." George nodded slowly. "You're right." He looked older in that moment. Not angry, just deeply disappointed. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. "I'll move on." The words sounded strange coming out of my mouth. Move on. As if you could simply step away from the future you had been planning for years. "And Ethan?" Patricia asked quietly. I exhaled. "Ethan will have to live with the choices he made." Patricia began crying again. "He's our only child." "I know," I said softly, "and I'm truly sorry." Because despite everything, I knew this was breaking their hearts too. George stood and walked around the desk. He extended his hand. "You are a remarkable woman, Natalie." I shook it. "I'm sorry our son wasn't worthy of you." That sentence finally cracked something inside me, because until that moment, I had been operating on pure determination. Now the grief finally slipped through. I wasn't just losing Ethan. I was losing the future I thought I had, the family I thought I was joining, the life I had imagined. Patricia hugged me again at the door. "If you ever need anything," she whispered, "you will always be welcome here." I thanked her. Then I walked out into the cool night air. The drive home felt emptier than the drive there. The anger that had fueled me earlier had faded. All that remained was exhaustion. When I pulled into my driveway, Ethan's car was gone. His key sat on the kitchen counter. Next to it was a folded note. I almost didn't read it, but curiosity won. "Natalie, I know you'll never forgive me, but you need to know I did love you. What I did was unforgivable, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. I hope someday you find someone who deserves you. Ethan." I stared at the note for a long time. Then I crumpled it and dropped it into the trash. Because in that moment, I realized something painful but necessary. The man I loved no longer existed. Maybe he never had. And the woman I had been before that video was gone too. The next morning began with my phone vibrating at 7:02 a.m. For a few seconds, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, disoriented, trying to remember why my chest felt so heavy. Then it came back. Vegas. The video. The canceled wedding. Ethan. My phone buzzed again on the nightstand. Daniel. My brother rarely called before noon unless something was wrong, I answered. "Natalie, you awake?" "Barely," I muttered. "You might want to check social media." My stomach tightened immediately. "What happened?" Daniel hesitated. "Jessica Price is telling people you made the whole cheating story up." For a moment, I said nothing. Then I sat up. "What?" "She's telling people Ethan's bachelor party was normal," Daniel continued. "She's saying you got cold feet and panicked before the wedding." I felt something cold settle into my chest. Of course she is. Nat, people are starting to ask questions. Let them. But after the call ended, curiosity pushed me to open my phone. Sure enough, messages had already started piling up. Friends asking if everything was okay. Relatives confused about why the wedding had suddenly been canceled. A few even asked the question that made my jaw tighten. Did you really call off the wedding because of nerves? Jessica was already rewriting the story. In her version, Ethan was the victim. The heartbroken groom abandoned days before the ceremony by a woman who suddenly changed her mind. For a moment, anger flared inside me. Then something else happened. Calm. Because unlike Jessica, I wasn't working with rumors. I had evidence. Around noon, my phone rang again. This time it was Maya Chen. Natalie, I just heard what Jessica is telling people, she said immediately. I'm not surprised. Well, she's pushing it hard. She's saying you fabricated everything. I leaned back against the couch. She can say whatever she wants. Maybe, Maya replied carefully, but people believe confident lies. There was a pause. Then she added, I still have the videos. Videos? Plural, she confirmed. Different angles, longer clips. I recorded everything that night. That caught my attention. You kept them? I wasn't planning to send them to anyone, Maya said. But if Ethan's friends are going to lie about what happened, you should have the truth. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. 3 video files appeared in my inbox, each longer than the first one she had sent. Evidence. Clear. Undeniable. I didn't watch them. I didn't need to. The first video had already shown me everything I needed to see, but knowing they existed changed something inside me. For the first time since the betrayal, I realized something important. I didn't have to defend myself. The truth could do that on its own. Later that afternoon, I decided to leave the house for the first time in 2 days. The walls had started to feel suffocating. I drove to Daniel's bar in Capitol Hill, a place where half the neighborhood knew him by name. When I walked in, he took one look at me and slid a beer across the counter without asking. You look terrible, he said bluntly. Thanks. Any word from the cheating prince? His friends are doing damage control, I replied. Apparently I'm the villain now. Daniel snorted. Of course you are. It's always easier to blame the person who exposes the problem. A few regulars at the bar offered quiet condolences. Daniel had clearly told them the basic story. They treated me the way people treat someone who has experienced a loss. And in a way, I had. Not a death, but the death of the life I thought I was about to start. That evening, 2 of Daniel's friends joined us. They insisted on dragging me out to dinner, then to a pool hall, then to another bar. For the first time in days, I laughed, not because things were okay, but because anger had finally replaced the hollow shock I'd been living inside. On the drive home later that night, Daniel glanced at me from the driver's seat. So what's the plan now? I don't know yet. Well, he said, just make sure one thing happens. What's that? Don't let Ethan's mistake turn you into someone you're not. I looked out the window at the city lights passing by. 2 days ago, my life had collapsed. But for the first time since it happened, I could feel something else growing beneath the wreckage. Clarity. Because Ethan had made his choice. And now it was time for me to make mine. 2 weeks passed before I saw Ethan again. 2 quiet weeks filled with unanswered calls, ignored messages, and the slow, uncomfortable process of learning how to live alone again. For the first few days, my phone had barely stopped buzzing. Friends, relatives, coworkers. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. Some offered genuine support. Others asked questions in the cautious tone people use when they suspect there might be 2 sides to a story. I kept my answers simple. The wedding was canceled. Ethan cheated. That was all anyone really needed to know. Eventually, the calls slowed down. Life began settling into a new routine. The wedding gifts were returned. The decorations Patricia had helped me choose were boxed up and donated. My house slowly started feeling like mine again, instead of something we had built together. For a while, I thought the worst part was over. I was wrong. It happened on a Saturday afternoon at the grocery store. I was standing in the pasta aisle, staring at 2 different brands of tomato sauce and trying to remember which one I usually bought, when Ethan's voice used to echo through the kitchen. Natalie. The sound froze me in place. I turned slowly. but it wasn't Ethan standing there. It was Jessica Price. Behind her stood two of Ethan's other friends, Amanda Foster and Christine Yang, the same women who had always treated me like I was an accessory in Ethan's life, rather than someone who belonged there. Jessica walked toward me with exaggerated concern on her face. "Natalie, thank God we found you." I set the jar back on the shelf. "What do you want?" "We need to talk," she said. "About Ethan." "No," I replied calmly. "We don't." Amanda crossed her arms. "You've been ignoring him for 2 weeks. Don't you think that's a little childish?" I turned fully toward them. Childish? My fiancé cheated on me with 2 strangers 3 days before our wedding. And you think I'm being childish for not wanting to talk to him? Christine stepped closer. "He made a mistake." "A drunken mistake," Amanda added. "But he loves you." I stared at them. The sheer audacity almost made me laugh. "He slept with 2 women while laughing about how boring I am." Jessica sighed dramatically. "It was a bachelor party. Things get wild." "That wasn't wild," I said quietly. "That was betrayal." "You're throwing away 3 years over 1 bad night," Amanda insisted. 3 years were thrown away the moment he made that choice. Jessica's voice sharpened. "You're humiliating him, Natalie. Sending that video to his parents was cruel." I felt my patience evaporate. He humiliated himself. "Everyone makes mistakes," Christine argued. "Some mistakes are unforgivable." Jessica suddenly pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Ethan." My voice dropped. "Don't. He deserves a chance to explain." I stepped forward and took the phone from her hand before she could dial. "Give it back," she snapped. "I will when you promise not to call him." "You can't avoid him forever." "I don't need to avoid him," I said. "I just don't need him in my life." Jessica snatched the phone back. "You're being vindictive." "No," I replied calmly. "I'm being finished." Amanda leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You know what I think? I think you're using this as an excuse to run. You always knew Ethan was out of your league." That sentence landed like a slap. For a moment, the old insecurity tried to rise, the one that wondered if maybe they had always believed I wasn't good enough for him. Then I remembered the video, the laughter, the mockery. I looked Amanda straight in the eyes. "Your friend destroyed a 3-year relationship for a few hours of fun with strangers. If that's out of my league, I'm happy to stay single." Jessica's expression hardened. I frowned slightly. "What?" "She's been there every Saturday, hoping you'll show up." "She's miserable," Christine added. "Lost her job," Amanda said. "Her parents won't speak to her." Jessica stepped closer. "She's living in a hotel because she can't afford her apartment anymore." I felt nothing. Just quiet detachment. That's not my problem. Jessica shook her head in disbelief. "How can you be so cold?" I picked up my cart. "Because the man I loved died 2 weeks ago. And what's left isn't someone I want in my life." I started pushing the cart toward the checkout lanes. Behind me, Jessica called out one last time. "She'll be at Murphy's tonight at 9. I didn't answer. But the truth was, my mind was already made up. Because if Ethan wanted a final conversation, he was about to get one. Murphy's pub was crowded that night. Saturday evenings there always were. The place had been one of Ethan's favorite spots. Dark wood tables, soft amber lighting, the low hum of conversation mixed with music drifting from the speakers. For a moment, standing just inside the door, memories rushed back. Dozens of nights sitting in these booths, laughing with friends, planning trips, talking about the future we thought we were building together. But those memories felt distant now, like scenes from someone else's life. I spotted Ethan immediately. He was sitting in a corner booth with Jessica, Amanda, and Christine. A few other people from his social circle sat nearby, all talking quietly. He looked different. Not the polished, confident man I had spent 3 years with. His hair was unkempt. Dark circles lined his eyes. His posture carried a heaviness I had never seen before. For the briefest moment, something like sympathy flickered inside me. Then the image of that hotel room flashed through my mind, and the feeling disappeared. I walked to the bar and ordered a drink. It didn't take long for him to notice me. He said something to Jessica, who immediately turned and looked toward the bar. A minute later, Ethan approached. "Natalie." His voice was quiet. Careful, like he was approaching something fragile. "Ethan, thank you for coming." "I didn't come for you," I replied calmly. I came because I like this bar. He swallowed. Can we talk somewhere private? I glanced around. Half the people in the room were clearly pretending not to stare. 5 minutes, I said. Outside. We stepped into the cool night air of the parking lot. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan's voice cracked. I'm so sorry. The words hung in the air between us. I know I've said that before, he continued, but I need you to understand how much I regret what I did. I crossed my arms. What exactly do you regret? He blinked. Everything. My job is gone, he said quietly. Someone sent the video to my firm. They fired me. I said nothing. My parents won't speak to me. Still nothing. I'm living in a hotel right now. His voice broke slightly. I've lost everything. Finally, I spoke. And you're telling me this because you're the only thing I have left. That sentence would have meant everything to me 2 weeks earlier. Now it felt empty. There is no us anymore, Ethan. But we were happy, he insisted. 3 years together. That has to mean something. It meant everything to me. Until you destroyed it. He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. I panicked, Natalie. I was scared of getting married, of committing forever. So you slept with 2 strangers. I made a mistake. No, I said quietly. You made a choice. He looked at me desperately. People deserve second chances. Some people do, but not you. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he whispered, So that's it? That's it. You're just walking away? I already did. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. You used to love me. I did. Past tense. His shoulders sagged. So what happens now? I thought about that question for a moment. Then I answered honestly. I rebuild my life. And you? I looked at him calmly. You live with the consequences of your choices. For a moment, he looked like he might say something else. Instead, he simply nodded. I turned and walked back toward the bar. Behind me, I could hear him standing alone in the parking lot. But I didn't look back, because the truth was something I had finally understood. Love isn't just about emotion. It's about respect, trust, integrity. And the moment those things disappear, love becomes nothing more than a memory. As I drove home that night, something inside me felt lighter than it had in weeks. Not because the pain was gone, but because I finally understood the lesson this experience had given me. Sometimes the worst betrayal in your life isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the moment that forces you to choose yourself. And once you do that, you never settle for less again.